Johnson, and I'm the director of the Brown County Historical Society. Thank you for being here tonight. All right, so we want to start by thanking a couple people. First, the generous sponsors from the Agents of New Ulm Real Estate. Thank you so much. Whose appreciation for beautiful homes and community history makes this evening especially fitting. And they also have provided the wonderful door prizes for tonight. So thank you for that. Which, you know, if you've been here before for these door prize drawings, it's kind of a show too. So they're kind of the entertainment as well. So thank you for that. We appreciate that. Thank you for the homeowners of our future properties for this night, for their support and being the caretakers of these special stories. Thank you. To the BCHS Research Library staff and volunteers, your time and effort is greatly appreciated. Thank you. Turner Hall, Turner ladies, thank you for hosting, for your hospitality. And then we want to thank Kat for being here tonight to record this program, which will later be available on our website and our YouTube channel. Thank you also, Journal, for being here this evening. So, I guess for now, we are excited to welcome back our speaker, Lisa Besemer. So one of my favorite things about this program is watching how Lisa approaches history. What may begin as a simple question about a home, a family, or an architectural detail turns into a deep dive down the rabbit hole of local history. Along the way, she uncovers connections, forgotten stories, and surprising details that often leave us all a little mystified by where the journey doesn't end. And somehow, being one of the area's top-selling real estate agents, she also manages to devote countless late-night hours to researching and bringing these stories to all of us. I'm honestly not convinced that she sleeps during home season. And one final thought before we begin tonight. I want to point out that over the last 3 years, Lisa has researched and presented on 13 Brown County homes for this program. So when you stop and think about the amount of history, architecture, research, and storytelling involved in that accomplishment, I hope we may all be witnessing the early stages of the future book in the making. Of course, in her spare time. We all know this one for that. All right, so without further ado, please welcome back, proving that a third time is truly a charm, Lisa Besemer.
I was a little bit worried with the way the knives were placed on the tables today when we first got there. I thought, if you don't like the presentation, it was just like a quick grab. So I hope you like it. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Historic Homes presentation. I am grateful you've joined us for what I consider a personal voyage through time. This evening's presentation is proudly sponsored by New Ulm Real Estate, and I'm honored to share it tonight with a team of agents who share a common thread, a deep appreciation for the places we call home. Each of us, all of us in this room, love helping people find their corner of Brown County, and we do so with the same care and curiosity I bring to this history-based exploration. While I certainly love remarkable properties, I've come to realize that my true passion lies in the stories behind the walls. There's a quiet magic to stepping inside a house and realizing that every room has witnessed daily life, humor, joy, and struggle alike. The four walls of each dwelling aren't just timber and plaster. They're archives of the lives lived within them. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. The first house that we're going to talk to has always been interesting to me, 404 South German. It's one of those houses that all of us have drove by all of our life. This home was built in 1884, and the first owner was George Eggert Paul, most often in the newspapers known as E.G. Paul. E.G. was born in 1852 in Germany. He married Emily Fensky Wagner in New Ulm. He began life as a teacher, but then became involved in the Empire Mill Company, which he became a partner in. By 1885, he was doing well. They had 2 girls and a servant, and her name was Lena Baer, who was 16 years old. E.G. was a city councilor. He was also very involved in Turner Hall as a board member. He was an actor in different plays and comedies, and was even active in the Turner Bowling League. Heck, they even had their own private boat and bathhouse on the Minnesota River, as you see in the newspaper account. He was also a surveyor and civil engineer for New Ulm in 1887. He was president of the electric light company. He was a board member of the Public Works. He was on the school board, and he was a Democrat and was nominated for lieutenant governor and state treasurer. However, neither of these the Democratic Party won. They had 2 more children, Florence in 1887 and Archie in 1889. But E.G. struggled with his health. He even sailed to Germany in 1887 for several months for treatment. Thinking that his health would be better for him in California, they sold the house. He dissolved his partnership in Eagle Empire Mill, resigned as president of New Ulm's Building Loan and Association, and they left for LA, where he was engaged in business. However, in 1895, just 2 years later, E.G. passed away. He was only 43 years old. Mrs. Paul, Emily, married William Smith and stayed living in California. After he died, she lived with Florence. Florence was a hostess at a hospital, and when she was 63, she got married. She died when she was 66 at Chapel Sanitarium. Alice married James Brown, and she died when she was 44 of cancer. Hertha married Ernest Crow and lived in LA. Archie married twice. He was listed as a contractor. What a life change for Mrs. Paul. She left a beautiful home in New Ulm with esteemed friends. From what I can tell, she never owned a home again, just rented, and never had a servant again. Any of the addresses that showed up on the census are no longer homes in LA. In 1944, Emily died, so the Pauls owned the home from its construction in 1884 to 1893 for 9 years. Now, many times I'm not able to figure out what happened to the servants that lived in those houses. The 1885 census showed one servant that lived in the house, and her name was Lena Baird. Lena married Charles Lenhart in 1895, and Charles was a machinist at the foundry in New Ulm. They lived at 108 Center Street from at least 1910 to at least 1962. They had a son, Carl, and a daughter, Ellen. They also had another son, Charles, who was stillborn. Charles died in 1947, and Lena died in 1962. Son Carl married Florence, and they never had any children. He died at the age of 65 of lung cancer. Their daughter, Ellen, after mom died, moved to 417 6th South. She was a stenographer. They were very, very Catholic, so I imagine that she moved closer as she was all alone to the St. Mary's Church. She died in 1990, and she never married. She was only survived by cousins, and so there was no brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews at all. So went back to the house on May 3rd, 1893. E.G. Paul and his wife sold the house to Herman and Mary Boisman for $4,500. But then 7 days later, just a week later, on May 10th, they sold it to Ora and Emily Strickler for $4,600. Then on June 8th, just a few weeks later, Ora and Emily Strickler sold it to William and Mary Silverson for $4,700. Not sure why there were so many quick sales, but could it be that E.G. Paul didn't want to sell his house to his competitor, William Silverson, who was involved in the Eagle Roller Mill? We'll never know. William Silverson was a brother to Charles, who was president of the Eagle Roller Mill. He joined Charles in business after the mill that Charles had built for him in Nicollet burned. He was treasurer, William was treasurer from 1891 to 1901 of Eagle Roller Mill. Then he was vice president from 1901 to 1912. He became president in 1912 to 1924 after his brother Charles died. William and Mary were married in Cincinnati in 1877, and they had 2 children. Willie, who died in 1892 in New Ulm, and he was only 17 months old, and has quite a tombstone at the city cemetery. And they had a daughter, Wilhelmina, but she went by Minnie. When they first came to New Ulm in 1891, they resided at the Hummel residence on German Street. Minnie married Hjalmar Land Hoydale in Indiana in 1911. He was a very prominent lawyer in Minneapolis. They later moved to Florida, where Minnie died at age 61. They only had one daughter, and her name was Carol. She was a beautiful lady. She died in 1982 after spending many years in a hospital in Baltimore. William Silverson retired from active business in 1905. Now remember, he was president until 1924, but he retired from active business in 1905 and spent winters either in Florida or the Bahamas. They would come back to Minnesota and spend a few months in the summer where he would catch up on business. Mary Silverson died in New Ulm in 1922 suddenly, and William died in 1924 in Florida. It is eye-opening to see how large Eagle Roller Mill was at one time, as when William died, the Eagle Roller Mill in New Ulm, as well as the branch offices in Minneapolis, Boston, New York City, and Philadelphia, plus all the elevators across Minnesota and the Dakotas were closed until noon on the day of his funeral. While their son is buried in New Ulm, they are both buried in Cincinnati. So the Silversons owned the house from 1893 to 1903, so just 10 years. And on April 30th, 1903, William and Mary Silverson sold the house to Mary Beecher. Henry Beecher was born in Fort Dodge, Iowa in 1870. He married Mary Treadwell in St. Peter in 1898. Henry truly was a self-made man. When he was young, he had a newspaper route. When his father died when Henry was 16, he quit high school to support the family. He was then a carpenter's helper. Then a friend of his father's got him a job as an examiner of a mortgage company. Then he got a job on the railroad. And in 1897, Henry came to New Ulm as a station agent and bought this home for $4,750. He began work at Eagle Roller Mill as a correspondent. Just 3 years later, he was promoted to be one of the 5 directors and was named treasurer. In 1920, he was promoted to general manager, president, until his death in 1933. He was a charter member and first president of the New Ulm Country Club. He was director of New Ulm Parks Association. He was a school board member, and he was very active in Lions Club. Mary was equally as involved in the city. Her name was continually in the newspapers that I was reading for hosting the Women's Literary Society meetings. Her parents came from New York and Connecticut, and she made many trips back east for family events and Daughters of the Revolution meetings. Mary attended Albert Lee College and the University of Minnesota, making me believe that her family came from wealth. This is also the house with the most servants. In 1900, the census showed they had 1 servant. Her name was Mary Selner, who was 21. By 1910, the census showed 1 servant. Her name was Bertha Bethke, and she was 25 years old. 1920, they had a servant named Rose Viergel, who was 17. In 1930, the census showed 2 servants at the time. Frances Stodick was a 25-year-old servant, and Elsie Bruns was a 23-year-old cook. And I also heard they had a full-time groundskeeper/chauffeur who lived above the carriage house. Henry suffered from hypertension. He tried to reduce his stress by going to Florida for a period of time, but when he came back to the business at Eagle Roller Mill, the stress came right back. He died from a heart attack at Mayo Hospital in Rochester in 1933, and he was only 63 years old. After Henry's death, Mary stayed at the home at 404 South German. When she sold it, she moved to Minneapolis, as both Doug and James, her sons, were living at the time. Her eldest son was Sherburne Treadwell Beecher. He graduated from New Ulm High School. He then attended Carleton College in Northfield. He attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology for a 6-week special course, and he attended the American School of Banking in Chicago. He was a board member of Eagle Roller Mill. After the mill closed, he was a salesman for Equity Life Insurance Society of the United States. He was a member of the Congregational Church. He was a school board member, and he was on the Union Hospital Board, and again, he was also an active Lions Club member. He was also a veteran serving in World War I. He married Marion Schmidt in 1938 in New Ulm. They had one daughter who we all know, Roberta Beecher Hintz. Sherburne was only 58 when he died at Union Hospital of an aortic aneurysm. Exactly the same age and reason that my father died, so we have another connection body. At the time, they were living at 409 South Broadway, and Marion died in 1999. Their middle son, Douglas Noble Beecher, was born in Nicollet and attended elementary school in New Ulm. He then attended and graduated from Clover Military Academy in South Bend, Indiana in 1922. He attended Carleton College, Northfield, for a year. He worked for Eagle Roller Mill from 1923 to 1952. Then he worked at State Bond and Mortgage Company until health made him move to California. He married Betty Predergast from the center. While living in New Ulm, she taught at Cathedral High School and worked at the New Ulm Public Library. He died in California at the age of 51, and he had one son, Lieutenant Douglas Beecher II, who died in 1955 in a plane crash during flight training. He had also grown up in New Ulm. And the youngest son, James Morrison Beecher, was born in 1910. After the closure of Eagle Roller Mill, he was a securities analyst. He married Ruth Morgendale, and they had two sons, Dr. Lee Beecher, who lives in Maple Grove and was a 1957 New Ulm High School grad. He is a psychiatrist specializing in addiction and was inducted into the American Psychiatric Association. Their other son, Dr. John Beecher, lives in Edina and is in family practice with an interest in sports medicine. James and Ruth's home was located at 405 South Broadway, so right next to Sherwood's house, which also gave me a little bit of a leery feeling because one of the houses is our chief of police's house. So I'm taking pictures, and there was just something on Facebook the day before. Why is this person taking pictures of these houses? Well, here I am at the chief of police house. So the Beechers owned the house for 37 years. Mary then sold the house to St. Mary's Church on July 31st, 1940 for $10,250. St. Mary's Church used it as a rectory for many years. Gary and Ramona Sonnenberg bought the house in 1997, and Sonnenbergs lovingly managed this as the Deutschstrasse Bed and Breakfast for 21 years until 2018. In 2014, they were named Best Historic B&B in Minnesota. They also held many other events there. I remember when France and Bank would have their Secretary's Day luncheons there. The wood floors just shined back then. Gary recalls that the third floor had been part library and part ballroom before a wall was added. The third floor was Sonnenberg's living quarters, and in the basement was Mr. Beecher's billiard room, and one room was a humidor and cigar room. The basement also has a beautiful fireplace, and Sonnenbergs used this as their family room. Mr. Beecher's office was also in the basement, and they left the safe in one of the rooms because it was too heavy to remove. It was still there when Gary and Ramona sold it. Gary and Ramona also had some original furniture from when the Beechers owned it. There were 4 cisterns on the property, which Gary believes are still there. Gary said the wood floors are cross-cut oak in 1-inch pieces, which at the time was very expensive to put in. He recalls hearing that while Mr. Beecher was the New Ulm depot manager, he was a depot manager at New Ulm, plus he managed other depots as well. He said that he allegedly gave Sears and Roebuck their start as he let them sell their watches from his depots. Gary and Ramona were busy, as Gary was also the CFO of MLC College, and they were both involved in the Minnesota Bed and Breakfast Association, with Gary even serving as president. Gary and Ramona raised 2 of their children there, Jennifer and Matthew. Gary retired in 2016 from MLC, and they sold the B&B in 2018 to David Krinklau and Vicki McCauley. They only owned the B&B for a year, and then they sold it to Larry and Laura Hotka, who use it as a personal residence today. It's no longer a B&B. So we've got some pictures of the house that we were able to get thanks to Eric Bodie from Boco, because we weren't able to get some new pictures. So these were when Sonnenbergs lived there. So the first one is the formal dining room. This was the sunroom where they had different events in that room also. And the foyer with the grand piano that Ramona could play beautifully. This is one of the guest bedrooms. And this was the formal living room. This is a carriage house where one of the servants lived above. And you can see how big the house was from the back of it also. Okay, is there one more, Jen? No? Okay. All right, we have a little door prize time, girls. Okay, so we've got Kirsten Brolick and Jennifer Oddie, and of course Mary Manley, who is always the life of the party, we're giving out Perkins gift cards today. So it is only fitting to segue into the next house, and you'll find out why very soon. This is the Hauenstein house, and John was the founder of Hauenstein Brewing Company. He was born in Bavaria, and he came to the United States with his parents when he was 21 years old. His parents both died of a cholera epidemic in Cincinnati. John moved to New Ulm in 1857, and in 1862 he married Henrietta Fritschie, daughter of Johann and Frederica Fritschie. Mr. Hauenstein helped defend New Ulm during the Dakota conflict, and he joined Company L, the 1st Minnesota Mountain Rangers, as a second lieutenant in December of 1862. In 1864, he started the brewery along with Andrew Betts, and John eventually became the sole owner of the brewery. After 106 years, Hauenstein closed on January 1st, 1970. John and Henrietta's life wasn't always easy, with a cyclone and the disasters of the brewery to a fire in their newly built home. But they were stalwart, hardworking Germans. Remember this picture that's up here right now that was in the New Ulm Review of them in front of the fireplace as they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. John and Henrietta had a large family of 8 children. Their son Charles, born in 1870, married Louise Wagner, and they had 7 children. Louise died at the age of 50 of breast cancer. Charles, in 1926, died of hypertension and heart failure at the age of 63. They had a beautiful home at 1602 South Washington. I remember it as Dick and Sharon Siebold's home. Irma married Edmund Posh, and they lived in St. Paul. Henrietta married Richard Rowland, and also lived in St. Paul. Hans was president, general manager of the brewery, and he had one son who was a lawyer in the Metro. Carl lived in Marion, Indiana, and he was a salesman for an electric company. And Ilda married Ralph Freeman and lived in Ohio. Helga married Elmer Toppy, and she lived in New Ulm. And Julia, who I came to believe was kind of a free spirit, well, she was only 13 when her mom died of cancer. And according to the census, when she was a single lady and a teacher in New York City, then married Charles Smith. They moved around a lot for his job. They never had children, and I could never figure out where she was buried. John and Henrietta's daughter, Emily, married Fred Sider, who was the son of Adolf Sider, who owned the Dakota Hotel. Fred was the bookkeeper at the brewery. And for some reason, they left New Ulm around 1903, and they lived in Washington State. Then came back to New Ulm where he found various jobs as a bookkeeper. They did all right though, as they generally had a servant. They had 2 children. Aileen married Armin Hyman of New Ulm, and son Casson graduated from Purdue University and lived his life in Westfield, New York. John and Henrietta's daughter Alma married Martin Hose. And we talked about Alma and Martin last year as they lived at 308 South Broadway. They had 3 children, and Martin was the treasurer at the brewery. They also did well. John and Henrietta's daughter Frida did very well. She married Henry First, who was a contractor and owner of a stone plant. They lived in a suburb of Chicago and had many, many servants. This is the home they lived in, presently valued at over $2 million. But they also owned a summer home, and the Maumee Historical Society still has an annual Mrs. First's charity tea held annually in the gardens of this summer home. It is also listed on the Maumee County Historic Register. Interesting to know that Henry First was involved in building the Palmer House Hotel. More on Frida later. And their daughter Bertha married Fred Benke, and he worked at the brewery. They lived at 626 South Minnesota Street, a house I always thought was interesting. It was in between my grandma and my great-grandma's house. They had servants in this house as well. They had 4 children, and Bertha died in 1954. They also had a son, John Jr., who was a secretary and brewmaster at the brewery. He attended Education Institute of St. Louis and then graduated in 1897 from Wallen and Hennius Brewing School in Chicago. They had 3 children, Richard, who succeeded John as a brewmaster, Marguerite, who lived at 227 North Franklin with her husband Henry, and Laura, who married Ernest Irick and lived at 1601 South Payne, where Mary's sister Nancy Gingle lives now. John and Henrietta also had another daughter that married a first, and I could not find out if the 2 first men were related, but both were very wealthy and came from the stone manufacturing world. Louisa lived in Bedford, Indiana, had 2 children, and always a servant. Here is a picture of her house in Bedford, Indiana. John Haunstein Sr. died in 1914. And Henrietta then sold the house and all belongings to her daughter Frida in 1927 with the ability to live there until she died. Henrietta died just 2 weeks later after selling the house. So now Frida had another house. They would come here and use it as their vacation home. The large concrete planter and other concrete items were brought here from Chicago, her husband's factory. Frida passed away in 1940. And in 1943, her estate sold the house to Catherine Hintz for $4,500. Charles Leland Hintz was a son of Charles August Hintz. This is where it gets confusing when you're doing genealogy. And he started the Hintz line of dentists here in New Ulm in 1936. Charles Leland married Catherine Stubbe. He was a World War II veteran and received a Bronze Star. He joined his father in his dental practice in New Ulm. Charles and Catherine had 2 sons, Dr. Charles Hintz and Dr. Brace Hintz. Dr. Brace was a radiation oncologist and still lives in California. He never married. And their son, Dr. Charles, was a New Ulm High School graduate, then a dental tech in both the U.S. Navy and the Marines. He married Roberta Beecher. Yes, our connection to these 2 houses. They spent most of their adult life in Wisconsin and moved back to New Ulm when Charles's parents were in failing health. There had been a summer kitchen that Brace and Charles had used as a clubhouse. And with Dick Graves' creative genius, they created this into a beautiful, smaller home next to the big house. Charles and Roberta have 2 daughters, Sarah and Jennifer. Charles passed away just 2 years ago. And while they have went over to the big house every day to check on it or to use the laundry there, they always preferred their smaller home and stayed living there. When I show you the pictures in a bit, you'll understand why. Anytime they entertain, though, they would use the big house. And then when the girls come home, they still stay in the big house too. Here's the photo of the incredible home that almost everyone only sees from the back side. So through this front door, Mr. Hounstein was able to walk down the steps that were in the hillside and go right down to the brewery. And some of those steps are still in the hill today. This is the foyer and the open staircase you see from the front door, which faces the overlook of New Ulm. This is the formal living room with the piano. And this room is in the front of the house, so overlooks New Ulm. The floors are gorgeous. And this would be the primary bedroom with a large closet area. And when you sit up, you see all of New Ulm. Well, at least when there's no leaves on the trees. This is a bedroom that they converted into a library, TV room, office, and this gorgeous built-in was added. This was a servant's room in the staircase, and was also Charles's room when he was growing up. Here's another view from the top of the staircase, and a picture of the formal dining room. And here is the most unique kitchen I've ever seen, complete with fireplace and double ovens. And remember, I told you to remember that picture in the New Ulm Review? Well, here is the fireplace that Mr. and Mrs. Hounstein were photographed by. So that old summer kitchen clubhouse, well, Bobby and Charles added on to the existing building, and see how Dick Graves incorporated it into it. And they left the decoupaged Post magazine wall that had been there when the boys had it as a clubhouse. This was Charles and Bobby's family room on the second floor. The next picture is their bedroom and office, and the views from this room are incredible. And this is their main floor, which has the kitchen and dining area. It is just an amazing story, and that this house is 148 years old, the old house I'm talking about now, and there have only been 2 families that have owned it, the Hounsteins and the Hinses. Okay, we are ready for another drawing, girls.
Slow clap. Slow clap. Von Weber.
Okay, now we're going to jump all the way to Springfield. And this beautiful brick home was built in 1911. George Peter Forster grew up in a large family on the banks of Clear Lake, Siegel Township. He moved to Springfield and opened a harness shop. And then in 1898, he opened a furniture store. George married Louise Schmidt in 1896 in Springfield. And according to the 1900 census, George was a furniture dealer and proprietor. At one time, he and his sons had furniture stores in Tracy, Redwood Falls, St. James, Fairmont, and Springfield. Their 3 children were Irene, who graduated from the St. Clair Academy and the College of St. Teresa in Winona. She received a diploma in piano from the Conservatory of St. Cecilia and did postgraduate work at McPhail School of Music. She married Aaron Stephanie in 1924, who also worked at Forster Furniture, mainly their Redwood Falls store, and they had 3 children. Their son Vincent was a private in World War I. He married Juliet Hulger and was involved with Forster Furniture. They had 5 daughters. In the late 1940s, the family moved to California. Vincent died in 1987 in Brevard, Florida, and he's buried at the Calvary Cemetery in Mankato. Their youngest son, Aaron, married Rowene Anderson, and both were highly involved in the furniture store. Also, Aaron was a mortician, having received his degree in mortuary science from the University of Minnesota. George, the father, retired from day-to-day business at the furniture stores in 1933. Louise passed away in 1938. And after her death, Aaron and his family moved in with George. George passed away in 1954 at his home. He had been board chair president of State Bank of Springfield and was on the board of Citizens State Bank of El Paso. According to his will, he left the home to his daughter, Rowene, his daughter-in-law, Rowene, for taking care of him. Aaron and Rowene had 2 children, Karen and George Phillip. Phil, as he was called, was involved in the furniture store, but when he was in his 50s, he got married and he left town. He died in 2017. And Karen married Vance Buritz and lives in Oakdale. Rowene and Aaron built a 1-story home. And after this house sat empty, the big house sat empty for a few years, they rented the house to Dr. Francis and Glenna Boyle. Boyles actually bought the home on December 21st, 1962. So the Forsters owned the house for 51 years. Dr. Francis Boyle received his Bachelor of Science degree from St. Mary's College in Winona, then furthered his studies at University of North Dakota, then to Creighton University in Omaha for his doctorate. He then did his internship in Detroit, which was Francis's hometown. Glenna was raised on a farm near Curry, Minnesota. They met in college in Winona and married the first year of his medical school and immediately had 4 children. In fact, they married on Thanksgiving Day, 1951. After the residency, they moved to Tracy to be closer to Curry, where her family was from. But there he was met with 2 feuding doctors. Springfield had just built a new hospital, and Frank Pichel heard of this young medical doctor looking for a new opportunity and went to talk to him. When they moved to the house, they also had Frank Jr., so these were their kids, Frank Jr., who was involved in music and had 2 kids. Phil, who was a medical doctor and has 8 kids. Pat is an engineer in Nebraska, has 3 kids. And Mike, a lawyer in New Ulm, who has 3 kids. Then along came Ann, who's a paralegal and has 2 kids. Mark, who then became Father Stephen, is a priest. Jane is a nurse with 2 kids. And Jean is a mother and a teacher's aide, and she had 5 kids. Francis was born in 1926 and died when he was 91. Along with his private practice, he was a medical director for St. John's Home in Springfield and also helped in the transformation to Mayo Hospital. Glenna was born in 1928. She died when she was 96. They had moved to the Cottonwood Co-op by St. John's after selling the house in 2012. While they owned the house on Marshall Avenue, they added on to the living room. They also converted an upstairs sewing room into a primary bedroom's private bath. They also added the main floor laundry. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms. The 4 oldest boys went to boarding school at St. Thomas Academy and would often hitchhike their way home. The 4 younger children graduated from Springfield High School. Mike fondly recalls the formal dining room sported a ping pong table. The house was lived in by the Boyle family for 54 years. So in 2012, the new owners were Michael and Rebecca Bartz. In 2006, the Bartzes divorced, and Rebecca became the sole owner. She sold it to James and April Bigelow in 2017, so the Bartzes owned it for a combined 5 years. James and April Bigelow have 2 sons, Cameron and Xander, and they are the owners of 6 East, which is a coffee shop, smoke shop, that serves up coffee, pastries, smoked meats, and other dishes in Springfield. They are open every day of the week, and if you look at their Facebook page, you will be drooling over their photos. Okay, drum roll again, next one. Oh, wait a second, we didn't see the pictures yet. Hold on, girls. We've got pictures of the Forster Royal House. So the first is this lovely built-in with the leaded glass, and look at those beam ceilings in the dining room also. One of the bedrooms, Mike, do you remember which is this bedroom? It was the pink wallpaper one.
It looks a lot different, I'm not sure. That's my parents' bedroom.
Parents' bedroom, okay.
That's the sunroom.
I love the windows. So Bigelow's sent some pictures in to me also, and Mike gave me some pictures as well. This is the attic. And the stained glass windows, they're on the first set of steps going upstairs. So the first set, and there's a landing, and then going up the steps. But aren't they just beautiful? So you can kind of see where the landing is to go up again. And the formal living room. And back to the formal dining room. And Bigelow's have removed the carpeting, and the hardwood floor is exposed now. And the pretty open staircase. Must have been the front porch, right, Mike?
Yes.
Yes. And look at how big, so this is, the one on the left is the part that Boyle's added on, but the rest is pretty original, but Mike thinks the sunroom on the right-hand side was added on at some point, maybe when the Forsters were there yet. It was there when the Boyles bought it. Isn't that pretty? Okay, now drawing. Remember last year I talked about the beautiful Oaks house in Springfield? Well, the segue to the next house is that the brother of the Oaks from last year built himself a beauty in New Ulm at 122 South Broadway. It was built in 1907 by Joseph Anton Oaks, and he was married to Emma. But first we need to go way back to 1870 when Joseph was born in St. Paul. His parents were Anton and Walburga Drexler Oaks. He had 13 siblings. His parents owned a farm in Milford Township. And if you've ever been on a Milford tour, you will have heard about the Oaks family. During the uprising, the family fled to New Ulm for safety. They moved to St. Paul and eventually returned to New Ulm, but did not live on that farm again. In 1887, Joseph, or J.A. as he was called, and his brothers opened a variety store in Faribault. Later, this store developed into a dry goods store and ladies' ready-to-wear store. Mr. Oaks stayed there until 1902 when he purchased the dry goods store owned by William Hummel in New Ulm. He changed the name to Beehive, which was located at 6 North Minnesota Street. He chose this name because bees are always busy. His store's slogan and ads was, "The busiest store in town, there must be a reason." About 10 years later, the store moved to 104 North Minnesota Street, which is now part of Franzen Bank. Beehive was later sold in 1956 and became Raftus Department Store. 5 years after, Mr. Oaks and his family, after he bought the first store, moved to New Ulm, and they built this house at 122 South Broadway. Joseph Oaks passed away in 1934 suddenly of a heart attack. He was very involved in New Ulm and in the surrounding area. Emma passed away in 1943, and she stayed living at 122 South Broadway after Joseph died. They had 5 children that were raised in this house. Ellen married William Fender in 1926. They lived in Peoria, Illinois, where he was a telephone manufacturing company salesman. They had 1 daughter who lived in Illinois. William and Ellen moved back to New Ulm, and in 1971, their home address was 326 South Highland, and that is the home of, Mary, help me out, John and Alice Kunz. Anton J. went into business with Edward Baer, and opened a general store in Marshall and also one in Medina. He did move back to New Ulm at some point. He died in 1944 at the age of 43. He was married to Mary Lunch, and they had no children. Irene taught high school, and then she married Vincent Tausch in 1934. They lived in Moore, and they had one son, Charles. Imelda was born in New Ulm. She married Andrew Hogan in 1928, and they had 4 children, and they lived in Orange County, California. She died in 2002. Ferdinand married Maud Schuler from Oregon. They had one son. Ferdinand was a sergeant in World War II. They lived at 222 North Washington Street, another beautiful brick home. He was a merchant at the department store. He ran Beehive after his father died. He was only 53 and died of heart failure. According to the 1910 census, all the kids were home, ranging in age from 3 to 12. They also had a servant by the name of Emma Dawn, and she was German. She was 20 years old. After Emma Oakes passed away, it was sold in 1943 to Edgar C. and Cecile Beek. Edgar was also known as Charles at some times, too. Edgar was born in 1883 in Indiana, and he married Cecile Credicott in 1910 in Mapleton. When they were first married, they lived in Mankato. Cecile was very active in the literary club also, active at Red Cross, plays at bingo, bridge group, and what was called Mother's Club, which was almost like Home Extension was, where they would bring in speakers. Charles's uncle was John Siegel, who was with the Eagle Roller Mill from 1896 to 1910. In 1902, Siegel persuaded his nephew to come to New Ulm and work with him. And Mr. Beek remained with the Eagle Roller Mill until it was sold to International Milling Company in 1951. He was plant superintendent from 1925 to 1933 and then was elected president. Prior to living at 122 South Broadway, they lived at 100 South German Street. They lived in that house for over 25 years. And the 1920 census showed they had a son, Charles, and a daughter, Jean. They also had a servant by the name of Cecilia Goberlersch. They had another daughter, and her name was Vivian. And according to the newspaper article, the 5-year-old son accidentally killed the 2-year-old daughter, Vivian, with a loaded rifle to the back of her head. The father thought the gun was unloaded, but it wasn't. It had to be such a horrific thing for a boy, for a 5-year-old boy. Edgar and Cecile were in their 60s when they moved to the big house at 122 South Broadway. He was then president of Eagle Roller Mill. Their daughter Jean lived in Edina, and their son Charles lived in New Mexico. It was the Beek family home for 19 years. Edgar Beek passed away in 1963, and when he died, Cecilia was living at 409 North Broadway. They were both buried at the city cemetery. And what was really interesting to me is that in neither one of their obituaries did they mention their daughter Vivian. This house was sold in 1962 to the Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. And at that time, the DMLC bought a lot of houses for the professors at that time. They sold it in 1975 to Waldemar H. and Gertrude Nolte. Waldemar had graduated from Dr. Martin Luther College High School in New Ulm in 1929, and then graduated from DMLC in 1936. He married Gertrude Vogel. She was also a graduate of Dr. Martin Luther Academy and Dr. Martin Luther College. Prior to her marriage, she taught school in Sleepy. Waldemar and Gertrude came back to New Ulm in 1962, and he served as a professor of music at DMLC until his retirement in 1986. Gertrude also taught music at the college. They had 8 children. The children are Margaret, Annette, Ruth, Carol, Doris, William, Jerry, and John that they raised in this house. It was the Nolte home for 33 years. The house that was then sold to Randall and Martha Wise in 1995, And then it was sold in 2013 to Lonnie and Angie Carpenter. And yes, they are a singing family. Their daughters are Sarah, Abby, and Brittany. And they are lovingly taking care of this home. And it is gorgeous. And what you don't expect is that this house sits on a lot just over an acre, a quarter acre in size. And their gardens to the north of the house, to the north of the house are beautiful. Here are some pictures of the house now. So this is the formal living room. Well, actually, what would you call that, Angie? Would you call it the formal living room? Okay. And a really pretty fireplace there too. And the stairway, and look at the floors. Of course, on a screen like this, it doesn't look, but they are telling me, they're beautiful. And here's another, more of the parlor, I suppose. When you come in the front door, this would be the room that you would come into. And this is the foyer. And look at the windows there. And I love the money that they spent on doorknobs and hinges in those days is incredible. And this is the front porch, which we're not sure if it was enclosed at one time or if it was open at one time. And the formal dining room, and look at the ceiling on that one. And the kitchen and the little breakfast nook. And one of the bedrooms, the two bedrooms, yes, and this is the primary bedroom with a big closet. And Jen, go back one. And look, notice that curved wall right there too with the plaster. Isn't that pretty too? And this is coming from the staircase down, so to the left is that sitting room and to the straight ahead is the living room. And the big pocket door. And this is the maid's, there was only one room in the attic that was plastered and has a very small radiator. And this would have been the maid's room and the servant's staircase. You can see it's quite a bit steeper than the other one was. Not quite as glamorous. And you see on the right-hand side, the rolls there, that is the original blueprints of the house that carpenters have also saved. So just a few thank yous also. First of all, thank you to Brown County Historical Society for letting me do this because I really do, ask my girls, I get a little bit nutsy about this. And then Darla is great about, can you send me this picture and so forth, so she's fantastic. And I also used a couple pictures from Elroy Google's collection of the William Silverson. Thanks to Eric for letting me use his 404 South German pictures. And my teammates for putting up with my weird history geekness. And extra special thanks to Roberta Kentz. Roberta, Bobby, can you stand? And to the carpenters. And to Mike Boyle. I appreciate them letting me come into their houses, first of all. And I can tell you that Bobby's house and the carpenters, they are so lovingly taking care of maintaining these homes. New Ulm is lucky to have them taking care of these treasures in my world. So, does anybody have any questions about any of the houses? All right, well, thank you. Oh, wait, we've got one question. Yes. None of these houses, Bobby, your house wasn't renovated at all. I don't think carpenters do. I don't think so. I don't think none of these were. Yeah, not these. I mean, these were really probably more like mini mansions though than anything. Yeah, I'd say the only rooms that were small sometimes were the kitchens. Yeah. Yes, another question. when I reached out to, Gary Sonnenberg had a lot of information about that house, but he didn't know anything about the exterior of the house at all, right? Darla, do you know anything about, Darla had said that the third floor was always, or Terry even said that the third floor was changed, to house the Red Cross, so women could go up there, or people could go up there to knit whatever they had to do, to meet our quota during World War II, to meet our quota of bandages and socks and so forth. So that's where the Red Cross would hold their sewing sprees. But what he had heard, that was a library and ballroom at one time, so I'm not really sure. Yeah. I didn't see anything in any newspaper articles at all about the exterior, so that'd be really interesting though. Yeah. Anybody else have questions? Yes.
I noticed the last house that you highlighted, and then I went to the estate sale at Carol Anderson's
yes.
house, and they're very similar in the interior, especially the dining. Do you know who built those homes?
No, I don't. And it wasn't, there was one, I think last year when we did it, there was one common architect, Carl Heers. But this year, none of the newspaper articles said who any of the builders were. And it's really hard because the city didn't keep track of any of the building permit that they know of, that they can find when I talked to Elwood. So yeah, that'd be really interesting. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you again, Lisa. All of us at the Brown County Historical Society feel so lucky that this busy lady loves history so much. So thank you for all of your work. And just one last thanks again to Mary Henley and the ladies at New Ulm Real Estate for also supporting the history of New Ulm and Brown County, and for supporting Lisa. Again, we're really grateful. And thank you to all of you for coming out tonight, and all of you, I assume, enjoy history as well, and you are in luck because we are in our busy season at the Brown County Historical Society. So you have a lot of opportunities coming up to visit the Brown County Historical Society, to take part in events that are going on. I just want to highlight a couple of them. The Kiesling House is open for the season. So tomorrow morning at 11 a.m., if you are interested, the Kiesling House is open every Friday and Saturday from 11 to 3. We have our Lunch and a Bite of History series going on currently, and actually a number of our speakers are here tonight. So Terry Sweeney will be speaking in September, and Randy Krismarzik will be speaking in July. But coming up in June, the topic will be the capture of the younger brothers. So June 11th, if you're interested, make sure you stop by, you contact the museum, and get the details for that. If you have any children, kids, grandkids, nieces, or nephews who are interested in history, we have a number of options for them. Our one-room schoolhouse day camp is coming up on June 16th and 18th. And we also have a brand new program this summer with the help of New Ulm Area Foundation and Kathleen Backer. If you have someone ages 10 to 15 who is interested, they can be a junior interpreter. And then lastly, our popcorn wagon is open for the season, thanks in large part to Yvonne Weber here. So thank you, Yvonne. And the next date that the popcorn wagon will be open is June 8th. So again, come check us out at the Brown County Historical Society. We have 2 brand new exhibits up that you may not have seen yet. So visit us, take a look at the flyers and the tables. We have a lot going on. Thank you all.